And we're finished with our closed session, and I'd like to report there was no reportable action taken during closed session. We'll move to agenda item 4, the report of the North Delta Water Agency Ad Hoc Committee, the Sites Authority Water Right application. Basically, Tom and I and our staff are experts. We have had discussions with the Sites Authority regarding their project. We asked many questions. They made a presentation. We asked many questions. We got answers that allayed our concerns to the point that we basically agreed, Tom and I did, that the sites project is not going to hurt our ratepayers or constituents, if you will. And staff followed up with sites, and we were able to negotiate a MOU that basically gave us more assurance that they were going to operate in such a manner that it was not going to impact North Delta Water Agency users or impact the ability of California Department of Water Resources to meet our contract criteria. You have anything else?
No, that pretty much covered it.
And I think a lot of it is explain everybody who's participating should have got the staff report. And I think that laid out a lot of it as well. Yeah.
Right.
So that's all I've got to say as part of the ad hoc committee.
And
So we'll move on to the engineer's report.
yeah, so now we're going to the part, a little bit of the ad hoc committee had asked, obviously, our engineering firm, MBK, to do a lot of this review and to help them, understand what we were being told by the authority and through looking at the modeling results and such. So,
with the help of MBK, it basically we had to have them do our due diligence to make sure that what we were getting told was correct.
yeah, so this way the rest of the board will be able to see a little bit of what the committee worked on.
Please proceed, Ann. Thank you.
Okay, are you guys seeing the presentation?
Yes, we
in the
are.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, right view and everything, huh? Okay. So we're gonna give a overview of Sites Reservoir, talk about their operational criteria, primarily their diversion criteria, a little bit about their releases, summarize some of the water quality review and modeling that they've done. And then I've got a slide that explains their water right approach, which I think puts some of these details kind of into reality of what they've requested for their permit. So I'll maybe caveat this, that this is all based on our review at MBK. I'm obviously not a Sites Reservoir consultant. I'm in North Delta. And so this is my understanding of the sites project. I've got a pretty good understanding. I've got Gary and Yen here for backup as well. But if we do get into the weeds at all, we'll have to defer some of those questions to follow up with sites on some of the technical details. But I think we've got enough for everybody to go from. I did use quite a few slides from material we obtained from sites through those ad hoc committee meetings. And so I'll do my best to explain them. I think some of them give a pretty good summary of the project and are just a quick starting point for all of you. So Sites Reservoir is shown here. It's just west of Maxwell in the foothills there. The premise of the project is to divert water mainly from the Sacramento River through existing facilities. You hold that water in sites and then release it later into the Colusa Basin drain and potentially down the ridge cut or back into the Sacramento River to continue down. So there's North of Delta local users. The participants are shown in light blue here on this map. So we've got some local entities, and then we've also got some south of Delta entities. And so those are shown here on the map, again, still in this blue color, but just wanted to highlight that to move water from sites to those users south of the Delta, we've got to move that water through the Delta. And so that's proposed at existing export facilities. no new facilities are proposed there. Off to the right here, they've got a graphic that shows you the total storage capacity of the reservoir, 1.5 million acre feet. Again, it's highlighting those participants and their volumes of water. I did want to point out, was there a question?
No.
No, okay. I did want to point out the Bureau of Reclamation is a participant, so they do hold a small volume of water relatively. I know they've requested larger volumes, and so if there are other participants who are reducing in quantities, I know they want to, that's why they've got the range here of their proposed volume. My understanding is that they're largely invested, hoping to improve cold water pool management through exchanges out of Shasta Reservoir. The state of California is a participant through its Prop 1 funding. So I thought it's important to point out that that will be managed by CDFW. And so DWR is not an owner or direct investor in Sites Reservoir. So that water is proposed for ecosystem benefits. I think most of it is supposed to go down through the Ridge Cut into the Yolo bypass to promote some of those fish food programs that are going there. This is an overview of all of the material, at least in the past couple of years, that's been prepared or submitted. You know, this project's been around for a long time, and so there are many other volumes of material kind of prior to this most recent phase. But so here we've got some key dates, just components that we have looked at and your legal counsel has looked at and the ad hoc committee has considered in all of these decisions. So primarily focused on the water right application, which was filed back in 2022 and included a very extensive water availability analyses. Over the next several months, sites did prepare some amendments, some errata, and some additional material, largely at the request of the State Water Board as it went through its review of that application. I did add in here a couple key points. You know, sites prepared material and did analyses of water quality specific to North Delta. And so that was part of what our ad hoc committee has been considering. And I thought it's important to talk about here for the public, just that sites did consider North Delta's contract in its review and conducted analyses just to ensure that there wouldn't be major impacts to water quality within North Delta.
Which, by the way, we don't get that from the state all the time, so it was nice.
So I'm going to go through a couple of operational slides. These are slides right from sites. So just, I know they're wordy, but hang with me. So I think the key here is that sites is proposing to divert Sacramento River flow only when all of the following conditions are met. And these conditions seem to be very protective of North Delta Water Agency, largely because they're letting sites divert water only really in the wet months of the wet years. And so the biggest key in my mind is that the Delta has to be in excess conditions as it's determined by the projects under COA. And so that's protecting all in-basin water uses. It's protecting the project's operations to Delta standards under the Water Quality Control Plan and under D1641. And so it's truly just by definition, the fact that they've got to be in excess conditions means that there's surplus flows in the system. They're also only intending to divert when all senior downstream water rights have been satisfied. So I would group water users within North Delta Water Agency as being that part of that senior downstream demand. Again, flows have to be available above those that are needed to meet all applicable laws, regulations, BIOPs, and court orders in place. I think Austin will hit on what we're considering and what sites has also said they're considering here as applicable laws. The season of diversion that they've proposed is September through June 14th. That's the season that the State Water Board has not deemed the Sacramento River to be fully appropriated. So although they're proposing diversions potentially over the whole season, what their modeling is showing is that really their diversions are occurring in the winter months. There's not a lot of diversion that occurs in their models in kind of the September, October, and May and June type timeframe. So we'll look at a graph of that in a couple of slides later. And then also that flows exceed minimum project-specific diversion criteria. So those diversion criteria, the key for North Delta, I think, is this Wilkins Slough minimum bypass flow. So that's a point on the Sacramento River. And the flows identified here is the flow must be greater than 10,700 CFS from October through June 14th and greater than 5,000 CFS in September. Again, it only be diverting in that non-fully appropriated season. Along with this minimum bypass flow number to even start diverting, sites is not able to divert any flows that drop the flow in the river below these numbers. So if there's only 11,000 CFS in the river in October, sites would be limited to diverting only 300 of that. They would not be allowed to bring river flows down below that 10,700. The other piece is a post-flow protection. In the modeling, there wasn't a huge impact of this criteria, but it does protect kind of first flush flows through the season. So when flows at Bend Bridge are exceeding 8,000 CFS is typically kind of this first storm of the season, and that's what the agencies believe provides protection for juvenile fish out migrating with kind of that first flush pulse flow of the season. There are also minimum flows proposed at both points of diversion at Red Bluff and at Hamilton City. So what sites has done is considered this diversion criteria, and they've analyzed it historically, specifically for North Delta Water Agency, and compared it with available water quality data from 3 Mile Slough and the North Delta contract criteria. And what they found is that during months when we would be concerned or had historic water quality concerns, sites isn't able to divert. So it's largely this excess flow condition and the Wilkins Slough flow criteria that limit their ability to divert. And through the historical period of record, we wouldn't show any sites diversions during times when we've had concerns with North Delta water quality approaching or exceeding your contract criteria.
And so, Anne, this slide relates to the extra analysis that you were saying that they provided us based on our contract.
Yep, exactly.
Correct.
The graph here is just from their CalSim modeling. It's going to be part of their final EIR EIS, which I don't think has been released yet, but is expected to be released pretty soon. And is part of what they showed us. This is just a long-term average showing you that the bulk of their diversion is really occurring in January, February, March, the wetter months. And that's not historically when we've had concerns with North Delta water quality. Typically, we're having those concerns in late August, early September, and into October, maybe November. And you can see here that on a long-term average, we're really not seeing diversions to sites at all during those periods, very small. These are a couple other graphs that sites produced from that same modeling that'll be released through the final EIR EIS. So we're focused on the filling of sites, and so you can see the diversion with sites is the orange line. The baseline is the blue, the without sites condition. And this is an example year they provided. This is 1997. And you can see that they start diversions here in late November and are done diverting but sometime in early February here. And they, had a max diversion in this year of about 1,400 CFS. Off to the right here, you see flow at Freeport. And so you don't see a whole lot of difference. You'd really have to squint, maybe with your bigger TV now in the conference room, you can see this difference, but there's not a whole lot of difference between the orange and the blue lines. And that's really because at the time sites is diverting, they're taking just a relatively small piece of the flow. The system's in excess conditions, and there's plenty of flow at Freeport. And in the system here. So you see that slight difference again in these winter months between the blue line and the orange line. The bottom graph here on the right is water quality at 3 Mile Slough. So again, that change, the difference between the blue line, which is without Sites Reservoir, and the orange line, you can just see this minor difference, and just ever so slightly, water quality is a little bit higher in the with sites condition, but again, a relatively minor change.
And this is Melinda. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So thinking about the last slide, the prior slide, I guess I should say, as I recall, they've got, you talked about the Wilkins Slough, the 10,700, but I believe in September it goes down to
5,000.
And so that modeling they did for 3 Mile Slough includes, like, when you look at the September part, the fact that they get to go down to a lower.
Yes, that's correct. And in the historical modeling, they looked at 2000 through 2022, and all of the Septembers that's in the memo document. We could open up that graph if you want to see it, Melinda, but I think it was, I don't know if there were any years at all in that period where sites would have been able to divert.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify because some people probably have seen the board, the rest of the board, the committee has seen the 5,000 because Tom's the one that said it right away. But I just wanted to be clear that in the month of September, I believe the entire month, the 1st through the 30th or whatever, 30th. It's lower. And now I'm going to admit, maybe one of these committee members will remember. I don't remember why it's lower in September. Do you, Ann?
No, I know these flows are all based on what CDFW has identified through the ITP that the project is going to obtain. I'm guessing it's just there may be species less likely to be present at that time.
And if I recall, whenever this project started to get formulated, it was at 5,000. They have increased it to the 10.7.
The
So
CDFW.
that's right. So initially it was all that way, as I
Yes.
recall.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Now that
The
sounded.
standards are all about fisheries.
Which is even better. They backed off quite a bit. They probably kept the September at 5, the initial.
But like Ann said, only because CDF.
That's right.
Might have said it was okay. All right. Thank you.
I think what the sites folks explained to us at a previous meeting was that the 10.7 was geared around juvenile salmonids, which don't start until October.
I see. Thank you. Thank you. I knew somebody here would know, and many of you did. Thank
Yeah.
you.
It's a team effort.
I know. I like it.
Okay, I'm gonna switch over. So different mindset. We were just talking about diversions, right? So we were potentially concerned with that, with an impact of taking water off the river, off the main stem, off potential inflow to the delta while sites is diverting to storage. Now I'm gonna switch over. So sites is gonna release water out of storage for its participants or for its members. And so the timing of those are totally separate. And so sites has identified that they are really kind of an on project or an off project. So they're not going to go back and forth from one day to the next between diverting and releasing. It would really be in longer periods of time because it's all shared infrastructure. So when they're releasing water, what you see here from the graph on the right is that those releases are generally being made in the late summer and fall period. And so that's important because most of it is for its south of Delta participants. I think you saw member agencies, that large chunk of water on that first graphic there. And those entities want to obtain the water for their own use. That typically is going to occur in drier years and during the late summer and fall months. And that's because they would need the export capacity through the Delta to move that water. And so the water transfer window that could be used for conveyance is July through November. And so you see a lot of this water being released from sites is occurring during those months. The other piece, and I mentioned it briefly before, the environmental benefits. So the CDFW water that they're managing is largely proposed for yellow bypass flows, for in-delta fish, and then also for water supply for some of the national wildlife refuges.
So Anne, thinking about that first slide that you had, like, it had the amount of water, 1.5 million, and then it was broken down into who got how much. And so that CDFW, I think it was 244,000 acre feet there. And so that amount going through the Yolo bypass is not all the other water users. It's that amount of water potentially. And reason I bring it up, obviously, is that bypasses some of our water users when it goes through the Yolo bypass. But my point is, it's a small percentage of the site's water, if you will. Is that correct, Ann?
Yeah. I
Okay.
think that's a good way to characterize it.
Because I think some might look at it and go, well, wait, it's going through the little bypass. It's not hitting us, some of our diverters.
But it does in fact help the lower delta, 3 Mile Slough, Rio Vista.
Correct. I just was
Yeah.
pointing out it will bypass others.
And then the other thing is, and that you might explain it, Ann, that it is not the intention to move this water through the tunnel if the tunnel was ever built. It's the intention is to move it through the delta.
Yes, through existing facilities. I think I've got a bullet on that on one of my later slides, but if I don't, remind us and we can
Okay.
talk about it.
Perfect. Thanks.
So these are similar graphics to what we looked at for the diversion of water, but now we're focused on the release of water. And so you see again the orange line with sites. You see the release here. This is through the Yolo bypass. And so you see it, 450 or so CFS release through the summer months and early fall period. And so that's when they've modeled that release to occur. You can see again a slight increase here in total flow through the Yolo bypass over that same period. And what you see here is a slight improvement in water quality at 3 Mile Slough, as Steve was alluding to.
Ann, if I could,
Yes.
just to going on Melinda's point about the flow going down the bypass. Keep in mind that the flow we're talking about being released from sites is in addition to normal project operations. This isn't instead of going down the river, it's going down the bypass. This is new water in the system. So there's not a reduction anywhere. This is icing on top of what's already there.
Good point.
Good point, yeah.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay, so we've got similar graphs, and this is largely focused on their water movement, through the delta to those south of delta entities. You see this is flow sites release. You see them releasing that water really through the summer months and early fall period. You see similar increases in overall flow at Freeport here on the bottom left. Similar increases in flow at Edmonton on the top right. And then EC again at 3 Mile Slough. You see slight improvements during the time that they're moving that water, with some minor fluctuations at other times. So from their operational criteria and everything, we're going to shift into the water right approach. So sites filed a petition to amend and assign a state filing. It was previously the Calusa Reservoir with a 1977 priority date. And so if sites is successful, they would be assigned this 1977 priority date. They are not proposing diversions of CVP or SWP water. And so again, reclamation is a participant in sites, but sites is not going to be, an added component of the CVP. So we're keeping those separate. It is diversion to off-stream storage only, so there's no direct diversion. It's all water that'll be diverted into storage, held for at least 30 days, but typically, longer from those wet years until it's drier years when there's the demand from their participants for it to be released. And those diversion criteria that we've talked about are very protective. The diversions are proposed at existing points of diversion only on the Sacramento River. So at GCID and TCCA, their diversion works, existing facilities on the river. There are two smaller dams, as part of building the reservoir, on local creeks, Funks Creek and Stone Corral Creek, I believe. So those are expected to have kind of minor water on them. They're very flashy streams, smaller watersheds. So here's your point, Steve. All points of rediversion are existing. And so the tunnel, any future version of the tunnel, water fix, whatever you want to call it, has not been included in the project as a point of rediversion. And so sites would need to file a petition for change with the State Water Board and go through that process if in the future they wanted to include that as a point of rediversion.
And we would have an opportunity at that time to weigh in.
Correct.
That's correct.
What's a POU?
Point of,
That's-
point
that's-
of use.
Yeah,
of
so
use.
that's
Place of
the
use.
place of
Place of
use.
use. Thank you.
Back on the map, way at the beginning, we had all those light blue or
light
gray
blue.
shaded areas. So those are all existing places of use under either the CVP or SWP water rights.
And so
and
under the
so-
water rights, those two things go together, the rediversion and the POU go together in a water right application. Is that?
There, my point here is just that there are already existing facilities, both in terms of points of rediversion and the place
Oh, I
of
see.
use where
Okay.
water will be used. So they're defined. Any changes to those would need to go through the petition process with the state board.
Right.
Sites conducted 3 different approaches for a total of 6 water availability analyses. It's definitely the most extensive analyses, I think, that I can say I've ever seen or have ever been done for a new water right application. All of them indicated a reasonable likelihood that water was available and that there was additional water available in the system, even above and beyond if sites was diverting.
One thing that I was not clear on is the 1977 priority for sites. And I know it was explained to me, but I frankly forgot the explanation. So can you delve into that a little bit, or can someone?
So my understanding is part of it is the reason they are petitioning to release from priority some of these rights is in case someone else came in the future, you know, and wanted to build. I think Glen Reservoir was one of the ones that sites is petitioning for a release of priority from. You know, if they came in and petitioned for that right, then it could potentially impact sites' ability to divert. And so part of the reason they filed to get the state filing is just to secure that priority date in case someone else were to come in later and try to build.
Yeah, I think I told you all, I attended that joint meeting that Congressman LaMalfa and Thompson had, and yeah, Thompson, just even as a legislator, has worked on this since the 90s. But Jeff Sutton, I think, said somebody he's related to, and I can't remember who it was a state senator like 60 years ago when this project first came up. So yeah, I'm assuming water rights, were filed or what have you based on these descriptions these guys were saying, and the names may have changed, but I guess the purpose, it's been 6 decades according to Jeff Sutton.
And also just for state filed applications, beginning in 1927, the state of California actually filed a number of applications for water to be reserved. Projects that would later be developed.
Kind of like a placeholder.
Exactly. And then so other entities are able to seek either assignment or a release from
Under that?
of those filings.
Ah,
So they can get that, dibs on that priority for a certain amount of water.
Thank you.
thank you, Austin.
So one thing I didn't add in here, but sites in its effort to avoid tension with local water users who have filed water rights post 1977, largely Sac River settlement contractors with winter water right permits with priority dates in the early 2000s. So sites has agreed to subordinate its right. And so although it's seeking the 1977 priority date, it has called out those local entities with their winter water right permits as those permits being able to retain priority over this state filing.
Interesting.
That's all I had. I think we've hopefully covered everybody's questions as we went, but are there any others before we Go to Austin?
Not from me.
None
Nothing.
here.
Tom, how about the Van Lovensel's and Jack?
None here.
Very well, we'll move on to Austin. Thank you, Ann.
Yes.
You're welcome.
Hold on 1 minute.
Thank you, Yen, for your work on this too.
Doing our technical.
Austin, since you're there in the room, I'm going to let you take the lead on this, please.
Yeah, no problem.
But what do you guys see on your screen? Do you see the whole thing or do you
Yes.
see?
Oh.
No, we see the whole thing, but
We see the,
okay.
I don't know, editor view.
Yeah, okay.
All right, hold on.
Okay, you guys should see the whole thing.
Yes,
Okay.
we do.
Thank you, Ann.
So we can advance.
Yeah, you should be able to just hit enter.
So thanks, Anne, for that really helpful presentation. A lot of my presentation is going to be overlapping and somewhat redundant of what Anne provided already. So we should be able to whiz through some of the slides. So this slide deck includes a brief overview of the site's water right application in continuation of what Anne just provided. There will also be a discussion of State Water Board protest criteria, description of the normal resolution process for protests, description of what North Delta Water Agency's protest might be, and a summary of the memorandum of understanding that, if executed, would provide that North Delta could withdraw the basis for its protest in advance of the conclusion of the protest period. So the water right application, as I mentioned, was covered by Anne's presentation pretty well, but just to reiterate some key points, the application actually consists of a water right application as well as a number of petitions for assignment to get that 1977 priority, as well as a release from priority of some other state filed applications, which if that release from priority was not granted, then a future applicant seeking assignment of those other state filed applications could potentially obtain a priority in front of the site's project. So this release from priority would ensure that that doesn't happen. This is a short overview of just the general stats proposed for the site's reservoir project. It's a 1.5 million acre foot reservoir that would be able to divert at a rate not to exceed 4,200 CFS. The season of diversion, as Anne mentioned, would be from September 1 to June 14, because June 15th to August 31st is considered fully appropriated.
By the water board.
By the State Water Board. That's correct. Thanks. So the State Water Board issued a notice of sites application in June of this year and provided an initial protest deadline of August 1st. North Delta Water Agency, given the consequences and the import of this project, requested a 60-day extension. The State Water Board granted a 30-day extension, which would conclude this Thursday on the 31st. So in order to submit a protest, there are a number of requirements that are set out by the Water Code as well as by the State Water Board's regulations. This slide outlines just some of the basic fundamental criteria that you need to include, including contact information, a statement of the bases of your protest, and other information that's needed in the State Water Board's forms, and as well as conditions that a protestant might allow for dismissal of their protest. The bases for protests include interference with prior water rights, adverse environmental impacts, as well as allegations that the application or petition would not best conserve the public interest or the public trust under the public trust doctrine, or would be contrary to law, or would not be within the State Water Board's jurisdiction. To allege an interference with prior water rights, a protestant needs to identify what those prior water rights would be. So this may involve providing information to determine the validity of a pre-1914 appropriative right or riparian right, which can be difficult to ascertain because of record keeping. Information that relates to their historical, current, or proposed diversions and use would be needed to show how a petitioned or applied water right might interfere. So the quantity and the place of use and the season of use under those claimed water rights would have to be provided to the State Water Board. To allege harm to environmental interests or the public interest, and a protestant needs to provide not just the allegation that such harm would occur, but provide sufficient information to support that allegation. One of the bases for canceling a protest would be if the State Water Board found that there was not sufficient evidence in the record to support an allegation. State Water Board may, on its own volition, decide to reject or cancel a protest if it determines that there is not sufficient evidence to support the protest. This, in the case of interference with prior water rights, if the State Water Board can't validate the existence of that right or cannot determine that the water right would be harmed by the proposed action, then that protest may be canceled. Additionally, if the protest is based on environmental or public interest concerns, the protest may be canceled if there is not substantial evidence in the record to support that allegation. And this can be done by the State Water Board, but it can also be raised by the project applicant. So sites, if in the process of developing an answer to the protest, could raise these issues as well.
So that's a lot that just to even apply, that's before hearings and everything, which is why, one of the reasons why we asked for the extension is if you're going to consider it, I mean, you have to be ready. That's a lot of stuff and it has to be factual and it has to align with each one of those. And so that's why we were like, we need more time.
You have to rely on facts in the record.
Yeah.
That's right. And given the presentation that Ann provided on the modeling and the analysis that was done by the site's project authority, getting to the point of maintaining a protest would require some substantial evidence of harm and injury.
Because sites would counter with, we've got a 10,700 at Wilkins and we've got the excess conditions. They would try to counter things. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yes, and that would involve a significant degree of cooperation with landowners too, since North Delta Water Agency doesn't hold the rights to the water itself, but it has a contractual right with the state of California. It would be a pretty fact-intensive process. And so that was the reason why we requested an extension for the protest period. So resolving protests can occur both before the end of a protest period, but also before a water right hearing that might ultimately happen. The State Water Resources Control Board will typically accept or reject protests after reviewing them. It may not, in all instances, take that action to reject the protest, but just leave it to the parties to resolve on their own. If the State Water Board does accept a protest, then the regulations actually provide that the petitioner or the applicant would have as little as 15 days to submit a written answer responding to the allegations of a protest. For matters such as this that are fairly complicated and require a lot of evidence, we would expect that additional time would be provided. An answer would have to respond to the allegations contained in the protest and articulate what the applicant or petitioner would argue in a hearing to defend itself against the allegations of a protest. And it should also identify possibilities of settlement of that protest, which can either rely on the conditions that are raised by the protest itself of what might be sufficient for them to withdraw their protest, or they can also be suggested by the applicant or petitioner themselves. So resolution can happen prior to the formal filing of a protest. Parties are free to negotiate potential terms and conditions, which I understand has happened on a number of fronts for this project, not just North Delta Water Agency. If a protest is filed, there still is that period for the protestant and the applicant to negotiate and try to resolve their protest before a hearing would actually occur. This typically is a 180-day period of good faith effort negotiations that are supposed to occur. So here we would be looking at a February 27th, 2024 deadline for all parties who are protesting to try to resolve those issues, though additional time could be granted. If after that 100-day negotiation period, all protests are not resolved, the State Water Board may hold an adjudicative hearing to resolve the remaining protests, which would be akin to a court hearing where evidence is provided, and there would be opportunities to present experts if necessary.
Or cross-examined,
Cross-examination, testimony.
depositions submitted.
Yeah. The whole kit and caboodle. And, the State Water Board isn't rigidly governed by the same provisions of the evidence code and code of civil procedure that courtrooms are. So they typically adopt somewhat of a hybrid sort of proceeding that tends to borrow a lot of elements from the evidence code, but can have its own rules as well. So North Delta Water Agency obviously has had some significant concerns about the site's project over the course of its development because of the potential impacts that it might have on Delta water quality. There are just some key highlights of what is at stake and what is driving North Delta Water Agency's concerns, namely under the 1981 contract that it has with the state of California. That contract entitles water users within North Delta to suitable water supplies of a suitable water quality to suit reasonable and beneficial uses. There's not a specific quantity of water that is provided. It's pretty open-ended on that front. And the place of use is limited to the boundaries of the agency. And this protects North Delta Water Agency users to a considerable degree, as we've seen in past drought years. The users within North Delta Water Agency have a significant benefit under this contract because they are protected from curtailments, and DWR has an obligation to ensure that sufficient water is coming through the Delta to satisfy contract criteria. The contract here are just a few other key elements of the 1981 contract that provide benefits to water users within the North Delta. That is a right to divert from Delta channels, and the water rights within North Delta Water Agency shall not be disturbed or challenged by the state. The state agrees to make releases from its own storage from the State Water Project in order to provide water and meet those obligations for water quality and supply.
And so that's why during curtailment, our water users can continue to divert because it's their stored water at Oroville.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the state also has an obligation to defend the use of State Water Project stored water to meet those contract criteria. These are some additional details on what the 1981 contract secures. That is water quality at least equal or to the better of standards that are adopted by the State Water Board. That's currently under D 1641, although those requirements are currently being refined and an update to the Bay Delta Plan is forthcoming. But also to the criteria that are established under the 1981 contract, and those are year-round criteria. Article 8A, Roman numeral 1, provides that North Delta makes payments to the state of California, to DWR, as consideration for those assurances of water quality. And then the state has an obligation to defend affirmatively that the uses of water within North Delta Water Agency are reasonable and beneficial uses. Oops, that looks like a duplicate slide. So the 1981 contract is extremely important, obviously, for maintaining supply and quality of water in the Delta. And this is the crux of the concern that if there's a new reservoir that's built upstream of the Delta that is diverting water from the Sacramento River that would otherwise go into the Delta, there could be an impact on both water supply and water quality. These are just highlighting the concerns. Potential changes to salinity levels could occur if sites is diverting at times that where that fresh water is needed to either push back the incoming flows from the ocean that encroach into the Delta, or just to resolve what would otherwise be a saline mix that is higher than the criteria provide for. These reduced flows could also affect the hydrology and surface water elevations, given that a number of Delta water users rely on gravity-fed pumps and siphons. The stage of surface water is extremely important in the Delta, and reduced flows could impact that. And then finally, or relatedly, diversions could affect DWR's own operations of the State Water Project and its ability to meet the criteria under the 1981 contract. So North Delta Water Agency representatives and representatives from the Sites Project Authority have met on a number of instances to go over these concerns and work out a solution to ensure that those concerns don't materialize, and that we can make sure that the criteria and the quality and supply of water in the Delta are adequately protected. The Sites Project Authority has shared the water availability analyses and modeling that Anne described in greater detail to show that project impacts on water quality in the Delta would not be harmful to North Delta water users. As discussed previously, there were 6 different supply scenarios, and they modeled up through the year 2070 to identify different climate change scenarios that would show different levels of water and flow in the Delta. The site's representatives have said that they are incorporating operational conditions that they expect to be included both in their incidental take permit that will be issued by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, as well as the water right permit that they're seeking from the State Water Board. I don't think we need to go over these in too great of detail since Anne already covered them, but some key elements of those conditions would be that diversion is only permitted when the Delta is in excess conditions as determined by DWR and the Bureau of Reclamation. It would also require that senior downstream rights have their water needs met before diversion can occur, and flows must be made available to meet applicable laws and regulations. So that would include all the incidental take permit conditions that might apply, biological opinions that would require certain flows, and any other court orders or other legal requirements that may be there. An aspect of the incidental take permit that is anticipated for the sites project would be that there are certain minimum flows maintained at Wilkins Slough during different periods of the year. And covered this already, and we talked about this, the need for this was brought on by CDFW's concern for juvenile salmonid protection. So that includes both the minimum flows at Wilkins Slough as well as pulse flow protections that would be in place that would prevent diversion from occurring for a period of 7 days when there are 8,000 CFS measured at Bend Bridge, or 2,500 CFS measured at Cow Creek and Cottonwood Creek and Battle Creek combined. Sites is also expecting that it will make releases from its reservoir during certain periods to benefit both the CVP and State Water Project, potentially to increase cold water management in their reservoirs in Shasta and Oroville. And these releases could also show water quality benefits within the Delta.
And as I recall, what Ann shared with the committee previously was their slight benefits, but they are benefits. That's the point, but they are not huge or anything.
They're certainly not detriments.
Yes, exactly, but they're not.
During the months.
But I also don't want people to think that they're huge either, but yeah.
Yeah, that is correct. The proportion of the benefits are not huge, but it does seem like there could be some slight improvements.
But even if there's slight improvements, the time period for North Delta is good because that July through November, which Tom was trying to point out, is when we typically might see DWR having exceedances of the contract criteria.
Yep, that's right. Just a quick point on the Delta Conveyance Project, which Ann also mentioned, the DCP was not a factor in any of the analysis that the Sites Project Authority put forward. It is not contemplated as a component of Sites Reservoir, and the Delta Conveyance Project would not be able to divert Sites releases at its proposed North Delta points of diversion without a modification to the Sites water right permit. And that, of course, would create an opportunity for North Delta to participate at an administrative level to raise any concerns or potential impacts that might cause. One element that's important that Sites explicitly provided in its water right application to the State Water Board would be a special water right term that it negotiated with DWR and Reclamation. And that is that no diversion, regardless of the other conditions that we talked about, no diversion could occur for the Sites Reservoir that would cause adverse effects on the CVP or SWP. And that includes diversions while DWR and Reclamation have declared the Delta to be in balance conditions, so less than excess conditions under COA. But this also includes any time that might require CVP or SWP to release water that they have in storage or reduce their diversion from the Delta in order to provide or assure flow in the Delta that's required to meet any other applicable provision of state or federal law. So this could be under the Delta plan to meet water quality conditions. But as the Sites Project Authority acknowledged both in the proposed MOU and in their staff report that was used to adopt the MOU on their side, that this includes an understanding of the State Water Project's contractual obligations to North Delta Water Agency under the 1981 contract.
Right, so that's not in the water right permit, that's in the MOU, and it's the sites acknowledging it, not anyone else. It's
the specific linkage to the 1981 contract, that's correct, is not in the ITP and will not be a condition, an express condition in the water right permit.
But sites acknowledged it in the MOU as a definition of legal.
But Sites also said they're not responsible for servicing the contract. It is up to the state to do so.
That's right. And that's a good point. The Sites is not itself bound by the 1981 contract. But
they are defining those complying with applicable laws as being the contract. Is that my understanding?
Sites understands that it would be an adverse effect to the State Water Project if their diversion to storage caused DWR to be unable to comply with the 81 contract.
Yeah, thank you.
As it stands right now, Sites does not anticipate seeking any changes to those terms and operational conditions. And it commits to letting North Delta Water Agency know in advance of any requests that might one day be made to change those conditions. For all the conditions that we've discussed here, there would need to be several publicly noticed procedures in place before the changes can be made. So in terms of the water right permit, there would need to be a change petition submitted to the State Water Board, and that reopens a protest period and potentially a hearing to resolve the impacts that those changes could have on water users or the environment or the public interest. And site's also committed to providing updates on the development of the sites project to North Delta to ensure that everyone is up to speed and on the same page of how things are shaping up. Critical to the MOU that we have for the board's consideration is that North Delta reserves and retains its right to challenge the site's reservoir project in any future administrative or judicial proceedings, particularly in the event that changes to the project could cause harm to North Delta Water Agency or its constituents. So while it is agreeing that it does not see a need for a protest to this water right application at this time, it's not foreclosing itself from protecting and ensuring that its rights are protected. So that brings us to the end. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions of Austin by the board first, please? Hearing none by the board, we'll open it up to the public. Does the public have any questions of Austin or Kevin? Well, thank you, Austin and Kevin and Ann and Gary and Yen. And I got her name right twice in the same day. And I think that our staff has done a heck of a job. And I had to read quite a bit and kind of brainstorm a little bit and ask questions. And it was very, very heartening that the site's water authority acknowledged our contract, acknowledged that we had very legitimate concerns, and were willing to work with us. And with our staff doing the negotiating, they got this MOU negotiated to my distinct pleasure. And I'm content with it.
Steve, I'd just like to thank the staff and our consultants and the two of you on the ad hoc committee for all the work that you did on this. I mean, this is obviously a very important issue for North Delta. And I know you put a lot of time in to make sure we really looked through all the important points. And so thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And Kevin, if I could just add in on the item 5 here. You know, there is opportunity if there's any modifications. I didn't hear any proposed. And just to let everyone know for A and C, as manager, I provided a draft motion that would combine A and C into one motion, if that's okay.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you.
I will say on 4D for public input, Harvey Carrera emailed me.
Oh, let's hear it. Yeah.
He is in support of you guys signing the MOU.
Oh, okay. Well, thank
He's
you.
on his way flying to Portugal right now, but he emailed me that he read through it and he said he wanted to let you guys know he's in support.
Okay.
If he had complaints, he was certainly told.
Yes.
But thank you for sharing that, especially since he took the extra trouble on his travels to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Harvey is a very detailed.
He's very conscientious. He's like you. He reads everything.
So Melinda, if I'm understanding correctly, we don't need to motion that we're not gonna file a protest. We can include everything in.
I combined, yeah, A and C into one motion.
Okay, but do you want both read? I don't see the not file protest in.
It's at the end of that. No, at the end of the actual motion. And thereby forgo filing a protest. I put A and C into one motion.
Gotcha, thank you. So if you're ready, Steve.
Go ahead.
Then I would like to Make a motion to approve. Excuse me, and authorize the manager to execute and carry out the proposed memorandum of understanding between North Delta Water Agency and the Sites Authority, containing key commitments and mutual understandings for sites reservoir operations to not adversely affect compliance with the water quality criteria and the water supply assurances of the North Delta Water Agency's 1981 contract, and thereby forego filing a protest on water right application A025517X01.
I will second that motion. So we need call for the question through a roll call vote, please, Cindy.
Steve,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Jack,
Aye.
Justin,
Justin?
Justin, vote yes. Mark votes yes. He'll unmute here in a minute.
okay, that's Mark.
Very well. Okay, the motion carries 5-0. So,
Yes.
Oh, there's Justin. Okay.
that takes care of 5, correct?
Yes.
Very well. We will go to agenda item number 6, which is the public comment period. Please raise your concerns or thoughts
Or anything not on the agenda that
or anything.
you'd like us to think about for our next meeting.
Yeah, if you want us to address something next time, you could let us know and we'll put it on.
Yep.
Is there any public comment? Hearing none, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for your participation and your help getting us through this process. The meeting is adjourned at 4:22. Thank you.
Can I just raise one quick logistical matter? Since Austin's there, I'm thinking maybe we just get the MOU signed by Melinda. We should sign 2 originals, and we'll send both to Andy Hitchings. He'll get 2 signatures from Jerry Brown, and then we'll have one, and they'll have one.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Yeah. But thank you.
Thank you.
Logistics are always important.
Yes.
All right.
Well,
If the meeting's over, or when the meeting is over and everybody's finished talking, I just had a quick, completely unrelated question for Melinda and Cindy, but since they're on the
the
screen.
meeting is over. We've adjourned the meeting. Go ahead.
So I met with a couple of really nice guys from the university the other day who came out and were looking at our fields for the drought program. And as a part of that discussion, North Delta came up and you know, they were just asking some general questions about North Delta in terms of acres and numbers of, you know, constituents and whatever. And I could answer some of them off the top of my head, but I said, go to the website. I'm sure all of this is on there. And then that, of course, made me go to the website and start looking for some of this information. And some of it is not, I guess, easily found on the website. And I was wondering if you'd ever thought of having just kind of a, you know, a summary page or a frequently asked questions page where you might have, you know, a map of a kind of a detailed map that somebody could really look in on the boundaries of you know, North Delta and the number of parcels or the number of people served and the number of acres and, you know, probably a link to the current rate and you know, maybe where the monitoring locations are, just kind of like North Delta for Dummies. So somebody who's not really involved, but may have questions because they're aware that North Delta exists, could go and just, you know, find that summary information all in one place. And maybe it exists and I just didn't see it on the website.
No, so we did used to have a map on there, Jack.
Well, we used to have some other like type of information that you're talking about, but these changes that have happened for
Some of the changes and the map that was on there, I had to remove it because it just wasn't user friendly and it would be something I'd have to work with.
Well, bottom line, anything we create, we have to convert to a special thing so that
Well, it has to be
ADA, it has to be ADA.
Yeah.
So things that we had are not ADA compliant. So anything that we did have has to be converted, but you've offered some suggestions for, I think, some good ideas for new links at least. Might be a way for us to do it without having to do.
Or easily, like you said, like a question, common questions or,
Well, I had a document like that, but
Yeah.
anyway.
Well, I thought something like that used to exist. And I got on there and I started looking, I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm starting to
Yeah.
lose it. I can't.
no, some of them we have to convert.
Yeah, so, but no, I think it's something to consider. The map is where it gets a little bit more difficult. Because of what I'd have to research what type, what kind of file type that was, because what we did have a map on there at one time with points of diversion that somebody had put together, but then you go to the point of diversion and it wouldn't send you to the right place. And so I ended up just removing it because it was,
Yeah, we tried to get.
Wasn't
fancy a while
helpful.
back. We tried to get fancy and actually link it to the, what's that DWR where they have the.
actually the water quality.
water
So
quality.
Yeah.
We at one point even had it linked to that, but yeah,
yeah, it ended up being more cumbersome and not user friendly whatsoever.
broke.
And yeah, and then all the links broke. So yeah, no, I think it's a conversation that we can have and definitely, if there are questions, like things you guys want to see on there, shoot them over to me. We can make I talked to Melinda about the other day about creating like a quick resources page that does have links to other, entities.
And I might have misspoken and said points of diversion. And if I did, I'm sorry.
That's not what yeah.
No, she was just telling you about the map we
Yeah.
used to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if
We
I
try to
but I
get
think
fancy.
monitoring locations.
Water quality location.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
called out in the
Yeah.
contract so that people
Right.
can go, oh, that's where 3 Mile Slough is, or
That's right.
whatever. I mean, all of us, we take a lot of information for granted because we deal with it all the time. But, these guys were very nice, smart guys from UC Extension, but they were from down in Merced and they just, they weren't really conversant in the details. So I was just trying to help them out. I should have just said, call Cindy and call me.
It is easier, but I think your point is well taken though, in terms of, can we make it easier for people to go look for it? On the one hand, the answer is yes, but on the other hand, because of ADA, it isn't, because we have to, I can't just take a Word or a PDF document and put it on. We used to be able to do that, but we can't anymore.
Well, you're obviously way ahead of me. You're aware of it. Anyway, I don't mean to take up everybody's time on this. I
It's okay.
thought.
It's a good one.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Is that it?
That's it. We've already adjourned.
Yep.
So
Thank
thank
you.
everyone for your time.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
care.
Thank you, Ann.
Gary, you're in Arizona again, I hear. Paris.
111 today.
111?
111. Is that how old you are?
SoCal's having a heat wave too.
Thank you all.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Very well.
I'm trying to find the